Cascade Gardeners. Great to see you. Shayla Cook here on behalf of Cascade Water Alliance and the Cascade Gardener Program. Today we are speaking with Lisa Taylor on Transplanting 101. Lisa is a freelance educator and author. For Lisa, eating is the main reason for growing plants. Welcome, Lisa. It's great to see you again.
Thanks, Shayla. It's great to be here. I'm so excited to get transplanting. So tonight, I'm going to show you some time-tested tips for transplanting so your plants get a great start and can really thrive in your garden. So let's get started. What I'm going to do is plant into some pots, but we're going to talk about this. We're going to think about this as though we're planting in our garden. So first thing, before you transplant, get everything together. Get all of your things. Get your tools, get your soil, get your water, and all your plants together. Because once you put them in the ground, you're going to need to water straight away, and you're going to want to be able to top dress with some compost and amend your soils. So I've got all that set up. The first thing after I get all my tools ready, before I do any digging whatsoever, is I'm going to test my soil moisture. The soil needs to be the proper moisture because we want to make sure that it's moist enough that it absorbs water as we give it, so that the roots can start to absorb water, that they don't dry out. Also, when we have good moisture in the soil, it's easy to dig the hole stays intact, and it's much better for us. We can actually plant the plants to the proper depth. Here's how you check the soil. Grab a handful. It should hold together but fall apart pretty easily. If it doesn't hold together at all, it's too dry. And so you might want to run a sprinkler and then wait for a couple of hours and test again. If it's too wet, it'll just hold together and it'll just be a clod. And so then you kind of need to let it dry out. So we want to test the moisture. This moisture is perfect. All right. The other thing I want to do is water the plants I'm going to be transplanting. I don't want the roots to dry out. And I find that when the soil in the pot is wet, it's just easier to handle. Just easier for me. So I've got my, let's just pretend this is a big planting area and that this catnip is a mighty tree in my landscape. So it's a tree that I bought at the nursery. I found just the right place for it. Here's my area that I'm going to plant it in. And I want to amend a soil in an area that's about 2 to 3 times the size of the pot. We don't have to worry about depth, but we do want to make sure that the area around where we plant is loose and amended so the roots can spread out. So the first thing I'm going to do is spread compost around that area. It helps me know how big an area I need to amend. So I've got my whole area. I just put a couple of inches of compost. Now I can loosen the soil, incorporate the compost, and dig my hole. So this soil's super loose. Hopefully when you are digging your hole, it's just as easy as it is for me today. But look how nice the hole stays together. It's not falling in on itself. Holds, all the walls hold up. I'm going to measure that. The rule, and there are exceptions to the rule, but the rule is basically to plant the plant to the same level it is in the pot or in the burlap sack. So that looks pretty good. Take just a little bit more out. And we know that that whole area around that hole is loose and amended and ready. Now, I don't, unless it's got a really firm trunk, I want to be careful of the stem or the trunk. That's where all the living tissue is. That's like the throat of the plant. And even if it's got bark, that bark can be soft and you can easily damage it if you grab too tight or manhandle it too much. So be careful of that. You can definitely play around with the roots just so long as we don't dry them out. So I'm holding on. I'm going to loosen those roots a little bit so that they have a chance to start to spread out. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that right in the pot to the same level. I will backfill, what do we say? Firmly but gently. So I don't want to crush it in there, but I want to make sure it's set firmly and not going to sink or shift. So that's nicely in there. Same level it was in the pot. Now, I'm going to water it in. And I can use, I like to use a seaweed emulsion. And it's liquid seaweed. It's a potassium-rich supplement for the plants. The potassium helps to grow root hairs, and it actually helps the plant recover from transplant shock. So when we transplant any plant, it goes into a sort of a shock for a few weeks. It can be a couple of months sometimes. So the seaweed helps the plant to rebound. And sometimes it can cut down that transition time, that transplant shock time, in half. So I just read the label and I use the amount that it recommends for transplants. And I'm going to water this in well. And I just like to water slowly. And the soil should absorb at the same rate that I water. So that was a little watering can. You could use a bigger watering can with a rose that's not too big. You want it to be a fine spray. Again, we want that soil to just absorb as we're applying it. I love these little water top water bottle waterers. They're really nice. This mighty tree needs a few gallons of water. So I'll water over a couple of times over the course of an hour or two, just to make sure that the water is absorbing in. Then I am going to top dress with a woody compost around my plant. This will cover any bare soil, which is going to keep down the weeds. The compost helps the plant to grow. I'm going to keep a little bit of an area right around the trunk free of compost or any mulch. I don't want it to become too deep, buried too deep. Then, if I'm using drip irrigation, I can lay my drip lines or my soaker hose, and I can just start my watering. If I'm going to water overhead for a few weeks while this is making its transition, I can use a hose with a water breaker like this. They don't need any fertilizer. The compost and the mulch that we add is plenty of nutrition for this mighty catnip tree. All right, so that's how we might transplant into a big tree into the ground. Now I want to show you how I'm going to take this pot with several transplants. I'm going to separate them and plant them here. Same thing. This is a container that I've had on my deck, and I've grown other things in it, annuals. The last thing it had was a bowl of lettuce in here. So I don't have to replenish the potting soil. And I do want you to know that it's soil all the way to the bottom. There are not rocks in the bottom. When you put rocks in the bottom, it changes your drainage. It actually wrecks your drainage. So just use a good potting soil all the way to the bottom. Then I'm going to take and refresh my container with just an inch or so of compost. As long as the things that I grew in here weren't diseased, and as long as my soil still has good drainage, I don't have to replenish the potting soil. Potting soil in my containers will last for a few years before I have to replace the whole thing. But I can add a little bit of compost every year, and that's going to help everything. All right, so I've got, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 calendula in this pot. And that's the trouble when you buy these plants at the sale or at the nursery, and you end up with more than you think you think you bought. It's okay. They're going to love to be together. I'm going to just put 3 of them in here because I don't think 5 will fit in this pot. And so the same thing I said before, I'm going to not grab onto the stem. I'm going to open that up. Ooh, look, lots of roots. These have been in this pot for a couple of months. This shows the hidden age of the plants. Now, I want to empower you to just pull them apart. So I'm going to just take the soil and I'm going to break it apart. And it's going to break apart in its natural way, however it does. Oh, look at that. This one has 3 in it. Now I'm going to break those apart. Look, I'm handling the roots, can handle it. As long as they don't dry out, the roots can handle it. There's 1. Now these 2, I'm just going to grab just below where the stem is, grab the roots and coax them apart. Just like that. Anything you buy that has a number of different starts in the pot, you're going to separate those out and you'll get better results. All right. So these I need to plant to the same level. And I'm going to grab this by the leaf. The leaves can grow back, the stem cannot. So I'm going to just make a wedge and hang that in the pot at the same level and bring the soil around gently but firmly. That looks great. If it's a little loppy, don't worry. It'll jump back after a day or 2. Better to let it be.
Is there any benefit to pre-watering your holes a little teeny tiny bit?
Well, the soil I have in here is the perfect moisture. So
Okay.
I think if I watered the holes with this soil, I would end up having it too soggy. So here, I'm going to go ahead and put that one in. Again, same level that I had in the pot, giving it some space. And I've got 1 more. And this is going to make a nice pot. This will have 3 calendula. I can put this right on my deck. The pollinators love it. And the pollinators will come visit these and visit some of the other things I have on my deck. They will greet me. I love calendula. It's a self-sowing annual. It blooms in all months of the calendar if you let it self-sow. It's medicinal. And it's just a beautiful little sunny colored spot in your garden, even on a gray day. How's that look?
Beautiful.
So now I'm going to do the same thing. I want to water it in well with my seaweed emulsion. And again, they're going to need a gallon of water probably over the course of a couple of hours through the day. I usually water well, and once the water starts draining out the drainage holes, that's when I stop. For these new things, I'm going to water a couple, every other day or so. I'm going to check the soil. It should be moist like I showed you, but not soggy. If it's dripping wet, too wet. If it's dry as a bone, it needs more water. If you can keep that soil hydrated all the time, it will always accept water when you water it. My annuals are going to need some fertilizer, and in my containers, I use liquid fertilizer. In addition to the seaweed, I would use something that had even numbers, like 243 or 242, a liquid fertilizer, because in a container, I'm the one giving all the nutrition to the plants. So that's how to transplant, whether you're in a container or whether you're in the garden. You're going to test the soil for its moisture, make sure your starts are nice and moist when you take them out and transplant them. You're going to plant them at the same level they were in the pot as a rule. And then water them in well and give them a little head start by using some diluted seaweed emulsion so that they reduce the transplant shock time and they really get off to a great start.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for your insight on transplanting. We very much appreciate you. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
I had a great time. I hope that you enjoy this video, and I'll see you next time.